Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heater. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm here with my new friend, Michelle Beauchamp. Michelle is a consultant, trainer, coach, and author, and she's a shining example of dedication and commitment. Her unwavering commitment to excellence is evident in her personal and professional growth journey, and her motto, Unleash Your Inner Champ, reflects her passion for helping others grow. She's a certified John Maxwell trainer who has developed numerous leadership development courses, providing comprehensive content and practical activities to boost participants' confidence and competence for real-world application. Michelle's commitment to empowering leaders is evident in her recent book, Relearn Leadership. She envisions an evolving work environment and is dedicated to helping leaders embrace current trends. She firmly believes that the journey of leadership commences from within, emphasizing the significance of personal leadership, irrespective of whether we are currently leading others or not. Michelle has been doing amazing work in leadership and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. She's bringing attention to the barriers holding women back from reaching their full potential, such as restrictive environments and lack of confidence. Michelle is dedicated to tackling these issues through the Empower Her Collective community. Welcome to the podcast, Michelle.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate with you. I know you have a busy schedule, so I was really happy to be put on the schedule now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we connected on LinkedIn, which is so interesting because I would love to do more on LinkedIn and I just don't spend a ton of time over there. But I'm so glad that you found me anyway.
Thank you.
And I'm so intrigued to talk to you, obviously, for so many reasons. If you're familiar with kind of the content pillars of the podcast, one of them that I have outlined for the sake of being big and brave in business is what I have been calling diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Now, you're using DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But before we hit record, we did talk about accessibility being important as well. But since this is such a specialty in your work, it was absolutely just an easy no-brainer that this is a conversation I am excited to have.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And I am interested, when we were just talking, we talked quite a lot. So once again, we are, as you heard in the episode last week, we are recording this literally 1 week away from Election Day in the United States. And so there's a lot of emotionally charged conversation and experiences happening right now. And a lot of conversations, of course, because one of the major party candidates for president this year in the United States is a Black woman. And unfortunately, in my perspective, and probably anyone who's listening to this who's American, but maybe not everyone, unfortunately, she did lose the election. So there's also been a lot of really racially charged conversation leading up to the election and following the election. And I think now more than ever, but even before this, before she was the party candidate, and you mentioned in the past year or so, you're really witnessing what you described as people are no longer motivated to be big and brave in business, specifically when it comes to DEIB. So I'm wondering if you can kind of take a minute to explore that and explain what you mean, and let's dig into that.
Okay, yeah, let's do. I got to tell you too, on a side note, Sarah, your content and your purpose is so aligned with mine. And so let me tell you, I'm really relieved that we can be honest and have an honest conversation. Thank you. Thank you for that. Big and brave. I love that title. My experience is that in the last year, the commitment, and when I say commitment, I mean leaders being willing to participate in training for themselves and for their teams has really reduced. And sadly enough, I mean, on the one hand, it was good. In May of 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, then companies said, oh my goodness, this is really a problem. And they put their money where their mouth was, right? I mean, it seemed like they were really inspired to do that. They put messages on their websites indicating their plan to have justice, to hire correctly. Now, I will tell you that when you took a look at the websites and you took a look at the leaders, most of the men were white male. Most of the leaders were white males. There maybe were a few women, very few, and there were not people of color very much, right? So the look did not match the purpose. But the message was we can change that. I mean, I remember that I had a couple clients that said, here's the thing. We realize that we really need to match our community. We really need to make sure that the people who are in our community can relate to the people who are on our team, right? And the people on our team can relate to the people in our community. So we realize that while we don't have the diversity now, we can strive toward that. And we don't expect for people to resign a lot, but we can add people of color and minorities to our board, right? So they can be representative. So in 2020, 2021, 2022, the commitment was high, meaning it was popular and it was good business to be a DEI consultant because you could help people. You could help the companies. They seemed like they were really open. But in 2023, the commitment was less. It became very politicized, as we know. And things like the ERGs, the Employee Resource Group, started dwindling. Sometimes they would say that they didn't want to make people mad. Like some people, like let's say if there was a ERG for Black women, let's say, then other people felt excluded. Here's the thing: they never they didn't meet the intent. The intent was if you want to learn more about others, hello, you could learn more about others by coming to it. There were ERGs for women who work and have children under 5, right? There were a lot of ERGs, and it seemed like the companies were really cared about helping people connect more because of their differences. That's what it seemed like. Now, though, in 2023, from my experience, the companies are not so involved. And here's what I've been trying to figure it out. I've talked to several colleagues of mine too, and we've all experienced the same thing. And I know that companies have been struggling. I mean, I know that some companies have been struggling, and I know that AI has been a big source. They've been trying to figure out how to pay for AI and what does this do to our workforce. So I realize that there have been other priorities, and that makes sense, right? But here's the thing that's troubling too, is that there has been enough research to show when you have diversity, you have bigger profits. And what company does not want bigger profits, right? So that's the thing that has been really disappointing and really disheartening. And the thing about it too, Sarah, the need has not gone away. I mean, it has not gone away. We still have people in the organizations who need to be able to communicate with everybody, understanding the differences, accepting differences, and celebrating the differences. People still, I mean, there's the neurodivergent group, right? So now what does that mean? You're not going to have sensitivity to make sure you give projects to the people in the way and instructions in the way that they can understand it? Is that what that means? What about the disabled? Does it mean that now they're not important anymore? So it's not just about gender and race. This is what I have experienced. It always started with gender and race. Yes, it's about gender and race for sure, and not just gender and race. What about the LGBTQ plus community, by the way? So my experience has been that companies have not been displaying the bravery as much toward DEIB. They have not. They've cut the budgets, they've cut the people. There's a lot of research out there. People who used to work in the companies have lost their jobs or they've been given other responsibilities. So it has dwindled. And that to me does not represent being brave. It means they may be big, but it doesn't mean that they're brave. And it doesn't mean that, to me, it means that if you're brave, you're handling things that are a little uncomfortable. Step outside your comfort zone. Step outside your comfort zone. And like you said, unleash your inner champ, get over it. Learn how to say, I'm not comfortable with this. Okay, learn how to say that. And then be willing to open up your mind, open up your heart, and be receptive to learn. You don't know everything. None of us know everything. We can all learn from each other. So for me, they have not represented being brave because of that. Does that make sense? That was a long-winded answer, but does that
No,
make sense?
it does. And I think I have so many thoughts, of course. And one thing that I where I kind of want to start is I feel like, and this is a continuous problem we have with some of these things that are kind of initiatives or major talking points that are tend to be seen more as like liberal or progressive, like DEIB, which a common problem with that I think is there's such lack of understanding and such lack of there's such a disconnect from where we are and where we want to be
Right. The
that
gap.
that sometimes the things that are implemented aren't effective. And part of that is because there's pushback, so you have to compromise with people who are pushing back against initiatives like this. And so then what you actually end up with in a compromise is not really going to be the most effective way to tackle that initiative. And also, I think because it is so disconnected from where we are that to be able to measure like an ROI
Mm-hmm.
on these initiatives is hard because the people who are in the positions to make decisions don't necessarily have a goal of what they want to get out of it. So then they can't really
Right.
measure whether there's an ROI on this.
Right.
And I want to pause real quick too before I throw this back to you for your thoughts on this is if you're struggling with some of these terms or abbreviations, we have talked about some of these on previous episodes, but I'm not trying to leave anybody hanging. And I've gotten feedback from some people who have listened to this podcast who have said that sometimes I feel like you're talking so fast, you're throwing so much information in so many terms, and I really want to keep up, but I feel like I'm struggling. So I want to just kind of take a pause real quick when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And this is going to be like the most surface level thing. This is obviously we could have a whole podcast explaining like
Right.
what does that really mean, and honestly not just an episode, like a whole podcast. So
Right.
just like a really quick thing is we're talking about like diversity and representation in specifically in business. That's what we're talking about here. And specifically the inclusion and belonging piece being the part where we say like it's not just enough to check boxes to say like I've brought someone in. It's truly making sure that you're building an environment and a culture that in within that business and within your client base, within your team, within like all of those things, that anywhere there's people, right, that you're actually setting up everyone for success and wellness, right? Success and well-being together. So it's not just about, checking boxes and saying
Right.
like, yes, we've
Oh
interviewed
no.
X number of people who meet this criteria. So therefore we've done, as far as like we've interviewed 5 Black people for
Right.
this position, or we've, like
Right. You
we
meant
have
that.
a
Right.
token anything on our
Right.
board or whatever it is, right? It's not just about representation. It's truly about if you don't have a diverse pool of candidates for a position. This is one really simple example. If you don't have a diverse pool of qualified candidates for your position, then why not? Because it's not because diverse qualified candidates don't exist.
Right.
So there could be a million reasons why. And again, that could be a whole other podcast. Another thing I want to touch on, we've done an entire episode about ERGs, but employee resource groups, which Michelle touched on, that is essentially like an identity group. It's an identity group to connect and address the experiences and the challenges that exist for people who share an identity. And Michelle gave a couple of examples, not just about race or gender, but even could be something as specific as like women with children under 5 in this work environment, right? They're facing specific challenges and having specific experiences. And so to be able to address those things, and normally, and you can listen to the whole episode, but normally with employee resource groups, we want to ensure that this is a space for people to connect and be seen and heard with each other and to hold community with each other. But it is also, as Michelle touched on, an opportunity for people to learn about what is going on, what the experiences and challenges are for those shared identities. So those are some terms that we've kind of thrown around. I think that kind of covers just kind of like a quick crash course into like hopefully you feel like now you're on the same page, you can keep up with us. Don't worry, you can sit with us if you care about this, you can sit with us. But okay, so going back to what I was saying, I think things like a quota, or something like that. That tends to be, okay, we acknowledge we have a problem. When you go to our about page or our team page, it's all about a bunch of old white dudes. We get it. We that doesn't match the community that we serve, that doesn't
Right.
match our larger team, whatever it is. So we see we have work to do. And sometimes that can turn into an initiative like, well, let's just check a box. And then they don't see an ROI on checking that box. So
Mhm.
then they think, well, that means this doesn't work. Right. So I'm curious what you think as far as some of the initiatives that came out in the workplace after 2020 in the midst of George Floyd and the rise of prominence of Black Lives Matter and things like that, when people did seem committed to this work. Do you feel like some of these initiatives were not effective? And if so, like, why were they ineffective? And what do you think would be more effective?
Okay. Yeah. And thank you for clarifying the definition so our listeners can know what we're talking about. The the example that I can give in terms of what has been effective and then maybe why some haven't been effective. Well, to be honest, it does start with the leadership. And there were some cases, I had some cases where I was doing training and coaching and the leaders never participated. So it was not a complete buy-in. Right? So not a complete buy-in. In other words, we're gonna provide some training to our team, but as leaders, we don't really have time to do this. That's not sending a very inclusive message, right? So that I think has been a challenge. I have a particular client right now that I'm really excited about because they have had a program which has been targeted to women leaders. And here's the thing that has worked so great about it. It's an ongoing program. It's not like come in and do a 2-hour workshop and that's it. That's when it's not effective, to tell you the truth. Training cannot be effective or long lasting when it's so temporary. What happens in workshops, which I'm happy to do workshops, but what happens with those workshops is that they're excited, they get some new information, and then they get back to their computers and they see all their emails, and then the information goes up on the shelf and is not reinforced. The client that I mentioned now, the reason why I feel like it's been so successful is because we meet once a month for 6 months. And so it gets a chance to really get ingrained into their brains and their habits. So they really do recognize, oh, you know what, I think I was a little biased about that person, right? Because something happens and we've had conversations about it and it all clicks. They realize that they hear somebody saying something that wasn't right and they say, you know, I think that was a microaggression. Now I know how I can handle that. Or, and you know, this person seems to be quiet, so I don't think they have this, I don't think they feel safe to participate in our meetings because they're not speaking up. So when the programs can be a program, a development program, right? Not just a workshop, but a development program. That's different. When companies are really committed to developing their people, then they will allow 6 months or a year so that change can be seen. Then they see the change in the behaviors, and that's the leaders. Now, here's the interesting thing too. I think that the question I'm going to ask them when I talk to them again is this: what would your people say about how you've changed over the last 6 months? That's going to be a real eye opener. If they say, I hope that they see that I used to do this. I used to not be a good listener. That's something that people always want to work on, which is great. That instead of looking at my computer while they're talking to me, I turn my computer, put the top down, and listen to them, what they're saying, and that they feel like they're being heard more now. That's what I think that they'll say because they've been working on that a lot. And you know, the thing about it is that is about leadership. That's not about diversity or it's about leadership. So at the end of the day, leaders can be better leaders when they learn leadership tips. But one challenge to answer your question has been not enough time. So if some time was committed to it, but not enough time, a couple workshops doesn't do the job. With DEIB, leadership, anything else, you need repetition, right? Only with repetition do you begin to really, really change. And so that hasn't been available. That most companies have not been willing to invest not just spend the money, but invest in their people to really make a difference and see a change. When they do, then I think that they'll see the difference, that recruiting is different, that the leaders are having meetings now where they didn't used to have meetings. They're asking questions now where they didn't used to ask questions. The retention rate is higher, and the people are not leaving as much. The evaluations come back where the morale is higher. So those are some benefits, and because of that, the ROI goes up. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm so glad that you were able to really touch on that, especially that last point, because I think that there's a lot of people who are leading businesses who are always going to bring it back to how does this impact the bottom line? Right. And I think that can be frustrating. I mean, we could end the sentence there. That can be frustrating. But
Period.
I think that can be frustrating for me specifically because it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, it's not okay. It's not also. What I was going to say is it's hard for me to imagine everything coming back to dollars. But I think that, I don't think for me, I don't think it's about money. That is a reason why I care about being in community with people, right? Like
Right,
to care about other people and to love other people doesn't
right,
have to come back to money.
right,
And at the same time, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all living and trying to survive, let alone thrive in a capitalist society, which
right.
is driven by money. And I might have talked about this on the podcast. This would be a whole separate episode, but I just want to just drop this little nugget for you to think about as you're listening, after you're done listening, for you to think about. But my partner posed a question to me that he meant to be a thought exercise, and it ended up being like a bit of an existential crisis for me, which
Mm,
was, if money was no object, truly no object, you had all of your needs easily met and you lived comfortably, right? Then what would you want to do? And I realized that I don't know how to answer that question because everything I want to do comes back to the idea that I or people I care about don't have everything we need.
right,
So for me, I'm coming at things always from such an approach of service, but
mm,
also with a capitalist frame of mind because I've only ever lived under capitalism, right? Like
right,
all of us who are listening to this, especially if you're based in the US, if you've been
right,
raised in another country, you may have
right,
a skewed perspective, but certainly the as a globe,
right,
we live in a globalized capitalist society as well.
right,
So to a certain
right.
degree, all of us, but certainly if you live in the US, that this is what we know. So I
Mhm.
do kind of get it. And I appreciate that you can speak to yeah, there are financial benefits. And I want to also add it's also this idea of a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like we all do better together. And I just have a fundamental core value and belief in that. So, okay, being brave and talking about this transparently and saying the things that you're like people are afraid to say. I'm going to say it. I'm a white woman. I'm talking to a black woman, and we're talking about DEI. And listen, y'all, that's a brave thing to do. So if you're listening and you're like, especially if you're listening and you're a white person and you're like, well, I care about this work, but I couldn't be me hosting a podcast, having this conversation. Let me promise you that I see you, I understand, I am you, I get this. It's hard, and for me, I think one of my let me just be vulnerable here too and say that we still live in, as a general rule, in the United States at least. I can't really speak to other countries because the United States is what I know, but we really live still in very segregated environments. So
Right,
I grew up in very white environments. I grew up in a white family. I grew up in white environments. Most of the kids in my schools growing up were white. Not all of them, right? It's not like I never talked to a person of color before, of course, but that starts to sound like, I have a black friend, right? Like, okay, of course, right? Of course, I like knew other humans, that not all humans were white or whatever. And it wasn't until college slash my early professional career where I was in more diverse environments. And I realized that when I worked with specifically women of color who I thought were so cool, they didn't want to be my friend. Okay.
Mm,
And I'm putting this out there
mhm.
because it's so vulnerable. I want to be big and brave on this podcast. I'm living in this
I
title,
love the
okay?
vulnerability, Sarah.
Um I recognized this about myself, and yeah, it hurt my feelings and it made me sad at the time. I've done a lot of growing, and one of the big things that I had to really learn about myself is that you don't get to just decide you're safe for other people to trust or to be in community with, and they get to decide that, right? The
Mm,
other person in the equation gets to decide whether you're safe or not, not you. And I'm
mhm,
seeing a lot of discourse about this right now. Again, 1 week out from this election, there's a
mhm,
lot of conversation about well meaning white people who want to demonstrate that they are a safe person, that they're a person who cares about other humans. And so, especially for the people listening who do not run huge companies, they're either solopreneurs or they have small but mighty teams and they're trying to build their own business, whether they plan to stay solo or they hope to expand and grow their team, whatever that looks like for them. I know there are a lot of people who, because I am a white woman and we live in pretty segregated communities, I know there's white women who are listening to this. And I want to say, for people who are well meaning and they want to do a good job at this, how can we take steps to do a good job at this that aren't just performative?
mm. First of all, let me tell you what I appreciate your truth. And as you said, this is 1 week after the election, and it's been hard. And I'm going to be honest, 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 honest. Me and my Black friends said, this is why we have a hard time trusting white women. I'm telling you, I mean, I'm telling you. And I haven't haven't said that to anybody but my friends. But it's a matter of trust. So it looked like Kamala was going to have at least a good race. And it looked like there was a lot of support amongst a lot of people who there wasn't a lot of support. And so it's like the trust matter is, do they tell us one thing and then go away and say something else and do something else? It sure seems like it. So how do we trust? And it's a big topic right now. You're right. I mean, I do business with people, white women. I do. And I think they're great. I think they think I'm great. But what it's making me start to realize, to be honest, Sarah, is the values. It's like if we have the same values, then we can have a relationship and there'll be a connection. But if we don't have the same values, how can I connect with you? That means I don't trust you and you don't trust me. And so I'm not sure I have an answer to how to overcome that, especially this soon after the election. I mean, I'm really not. I have to have hope, like you said earlier. We have to have hope that it will be that. But I think for the white women who are listening, is to one recognize how we feel. To be honest, I'm telling you, I'm really being really vulnerable. Black women are the least liked demographic typically. I mean, we heard the person who won the presidency call Black women nasty and all kind of names. We as Black women tend to be the least respected, and so in our eyes, then it was decided by others that we were certainly not going to let a Black woman be at the top. I mean, that's what it feels like, and right, that's what it feels like, and it makes us sad and it makes us mad. To be honest. And so, as a white woman, I would have to say it probably need to be receptive to the feelings of other people, of us. Be open to, it's like in your eyes, you haven't had to experience that. When I tell you that when we hear people call other Black women nasty and bad names, they're talking about us, right? It's effective affecting us. So I think that it's going to have to be being willing to Be humble. Don't think about yourself so much, think about others, right? Humility, right? And empathy. And I think it's going to take time. I do think it's going to take time. I really appreciate you bringing that up, and it is interesting, but I am being honest with you. It's hard to it's been hard to accept that what we thought was going to happen did not happen, and it doesn't make it depletes the trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for meeting me in the vulnerability in the big brave space because
Yeah.
this podcast is not a place to come have an easy conversation. That's,
And
it's in the
big
title
brave,
and so
big
thank you.
brave. So
I hear
yeah.
you. I hear you. And thank you for sharing. And what I'm hearing you say is you have to mean it, right? So when you said earlier, you had leadership that would sign off on some of these initiatives, but then they didn't show up, right? So you have to mean it, and you have to mean it at all times and in all things. And
And not to interrupt you, Sarah, but you know what?
no,
You can't
please.
just say it. Can't just say it, and you can't just put it on the website. You have to show it. So the leader has to show their employee or their team members that they mean it, right? And how they do that, their actions speak louder than words, right? So actions speak louder than words.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So I think I would like to share some things that I think are actionable and that I'd love to hear from you, some things that you think are actionable, but I also want to respect your time. Do you have a couple minutes to go over?
I do.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you. So for me, having shared my background, my experience, which is also something I have not said publicly before, but I own it, right? I own it. And it's not my experience recognizing that when I did go to college and I was in more diverse environments and I did have workplaces in my early career where it was not all white people, but noticing that my friends at work were still, even if I really like this person, I admire them, I think they're so cool, I think they're funny and smart and interesting, and I want to be friends. And honestly, and I'll even share this, feeling jealous of white women that I worked with who got to become friends with a black woman that I worked with and admired, for example. There, and this did not happen once, okay? This is something that I noticed in my 20s in my life. And then I think the learning starts there because that awareness is really a big part of it. And so I would say, like, something that I think is actionable is really taking a full audit of what you are what are the indicators in your life and in your work. And this is, again, I just said, how do we do this? That's not performative, but in this, I'm looking for symptoms. So this is where my recommendation is coming from, is looking at your team, looking at your book of business, your clients, looking at your leads that come through,
Mhm.
even if they don't end up working with you. And then looking at conversions from leads to clients, gather the data and look for the symptoms.
Mhm.
Because, for example, I have done like a big recruitment effort years ago, early on in my business. And I noticed that despite my core values, despite what I was trying to accomplish, despite me putting myself out there and really like marketing in a certain way and using certain language, et cetera, to try to cultivate a certain environment that's welcoming and inclusive and to create a sense of belonging, accessibility, equity, et cetera, a particular recruitment effort that I had done that was wildly successful, brought in a ton of new clients for me. They were all extremely white. And I thought to myself, this influx of leads does not match what I say my core values are. Our mission statement at PodFox is amplifying underrepresented voices, whether that's in your community, your industry, or podcasting as a whole. And these voices that are coming to me as leads do not match
Not
that mission
representing it.
statement. And not to say that you can't be white and be underrepresented in a million different ways. You
Right.
definitely can, right? But in this specific recruitment effort, I noticed there were some huge discrepancies, and race was certainly one of them. And honestly, I'll even go so far as to say it was a bunch of wealthy white women that came to me. And some of them I really love and I
Right.
worked with, and I have, and maybe some I still work with. I really enjoy and appreciate them and their perspectives and their voices and their shows that I get to work on. But that was something I noticed. Okay, so then where are you putting that effort into connecting with other people? And generating leads sounds so clinical, right? It sounds so like sanitized and like, where are you generating your leads? It's like, okay, we can be more human about it and say, I mean, that is literally what it is, but you can be more human about it and say, like,
Right.
what communities are you spending time in?
Exactly. Right.
So I think for me, that was a big one. And I'll also add one more. And then I do want to hear your suggestions, especially since this is your expertise. I feel like another big thing for me that's been personally very effective, I love to read. And I've made a conscious effort to read books written by diverse writers, by diverse authors. Now, this includes
That's
nonfiction. And
great.
of course, you have a book, right? So we are happy to support that and promote that. And I have not read it, but I definitely will. And
Mhm.
I, I'm excited to. And so definitely nonfiction that counts. And there are a lot of great anti-racist books that became really prevalent recommendations after this surge of interest in 2020, 2021. So certainly that's a good place to start. But I also love reading fiction and making a conscious effort to read diverse authors in the fiction world has also helped. And I think, and I know this is a big thing of yours, it builds empathy because
Right.
I'm reading from perspectives and about characters who have not lived this very homogeneous experience that I've also lived. And not to say that I don't sometimes still read white
Right.
authors writing
Right.
about white characters. Of course, sometimes I do,
Diversified.
but it actually really does help so much with building empathy. So that's something that's worked really well for me. If you like reading,
Right.
then I highly recommend put an emphasis on that, and also take an audit of what you have read, because it
Right.
is so
Right.
easy
It is.
to
Yeah. Take
read
a look at
only
bookshelf.
white authors in a gender
Yes.
binary. It is
Mhm.
very easy. So reading LGBTQIA plus authors, reading Indigenous authors, reading Black authors, reading women authors, like making an effort, still are required reading in schools are white men. They still are. So, but there's so many books out there. So, anyways, that's
Yeah.
something that has been,
Yeah.
I think for me, that's been a really big game changer. But, anyways, okay. So, enough from me. Tell me, with your expertise, you go in, you actually consult on this, right? So for
Right.
the person listening, no matter how they identify or what
Right.
identities they belong to, et cetera, what can we do?
Right. And so, again, Sarah, thank you. Because first of all, you talked about your awareness, right? So, I mean, it starts with awareness. Well, we have to take a look. And it's awareness of ourselves, what within. And that's where we recognize the bias. I like that you said when you got to college, you realized you probably had some understanding too about where some biases may have come from. And all of us have bias. It's not like we're bad for that, but we all do. So one is recognize the awareness that you did, right? You looked around, and I love your idea. Look on the bookshelf. Yeah, you will be surprised when you find that you're not diversifying. But one of the things that I tell companies is, take a look at your current team, but also where are you recruiting from? The thing that happens is that many times they'll say, tell your friends we have an opening. Well, their friends are going to be like them mostly, right? And so now be willing to go look in other efforts. And I've worked with some companies and we've gone on websites to look for there's different associations, right? There's the Hispanic Association of Accountants, for example. There's the Black Association of Engineers, for example. So no matter what your industry is or what kind of people you're looking for, there are industries that have different different people, organization of different people, where you can find somebody easily. And I had a couple companies, they both were law firms, as a matter of fact, but both of them, we spent some time and looked online. Okay, there's this, there's that, there's this. Then we put together a letter. Let's reach out to them. Let's establish a relationship where you can always say, okay, we have an opening in this, because they all have abilities to hire. They have resumes of the candidates from those organizations. That's one thing that they really focus on. So and now here's where it comes into a challenge. It took time. It took time. And so what I found is that they weren't always willing to spend the time, or they didn't have the resources, right? People were, they were cut, already had cut staff. They were had fewer people to do more. And so this was, to be honest, just another effort to do some more work where it was going to be, it required effort, and they weren't willing to do the effort in some cases. And sometimes they weren't able to do the effort. I realized that. But intentionally, what you talked about, Sarah, was you were being intentional about it. And so it has to be very intentional. It has to be a desire. Like, this is one of my goals, like writing it down. I'm going to do this, right? Put the goal down, put the action down, and then you make sure that you do it. So one is looking in other organizations for other kinds of people so that you can diversify. That's one thing. And then to other things that people can do, well, in terms of learning more about cultures, you know what's really easy? What's really easy is that almost every month is a cultural awareness month. Like this month in November is Native American Heritage Month. So on TV, there are always shows that feature whatever culture is featured that month, right? So that's a really easy way, and I really like it because I go down and look on the TV and see what kind of movies there are, and I watch some really good movies for autism. I watched a really good one for Autism Awareness Month. I mean, there's just so many, so many. That's such an easy way. And like you said, also you can listen to different radio stations. You can listen to different radio stations and learn an appreciation for different kinds of music. You know what else is easy? Look in different cookbooks and cook some different recipes. Go look in cookbooks. And so for Native American Heritage Month, we could, make some recipes, and we can do some other things like gardening and we can do some other things. We could try some different things. Here's what it takes. It takes a willingness to step outside the comfort zone and try something different. Another thing, which is kind of funny, you can go to different hair salons. I read this book, one book by what's his Miles McPherson, I think it is. The book was called The Third Option, and he gave this example that I love. He gave people a challenge, and he challenged the guy to go get his hair cut in a different neighborhood. So a white guy went to a black barber shop, and when he first came in, they thought, "Oh, did you go the wrong way?" Or like, "What are you doing here?" And so, but they welcomed him in, and he had such a good time. They cut his hair. That place became his regular barbershop. I thought that was such a good example of how to put yourself in a different environment and see that it's going to be okay. In fact, maybe it's something that you actually enjoy, you appreciate it. What that did for him too, every time he went to get his haircut, it gave him a different perspective, whatever they were talking about. Because what happens in black barbershops, let me tell you, there's a lot of conversation going on. And so what happened and what happened, whatever issues were important to them, he got to learn about those. He got to have empathy with that community because he didn't have it himself. So he got to learn how they were feeling and participate in that. So there are a number of ways that we just have, you know what all we have to do? See behind me, Sarah, I have that sign that says mindset is everything. It's really, we just have to make up our mind, really. I mean, we have to make up our mind, and then we have to do it. We have to put it into action. So hopefully that helps.
It really does. Thank you so much for that. And I hope that if you're listening to this, you are feeling like there is so much more you can do. There's so much more you can do. And I think that,
Mhm.
I have definitely had some pendulum swinging over the past week of going back and forth between feeling like I give up and I throw in the towel and just let the world burn around me kind of energy. And then I've also had the pendulum swing to like, no, I mean, it just means there's so much more to be done. There's so much more to be done. And we have to help each other through that because we're all feeling that pendulum swing, and certainly based on lived experiences and identities, some more than others
Right.
are going to feel that. And I think one thing we can do is like take the baton and keep running, right? And keep running and let someone who needs to take a break, and
Yeah.
love them through it, and when we still have gas in the tank, we keep going and we can't give that up. And there's just so many intentional ways throughout your everyday that you can do that.
And the other thing too, yeah, the other thing too is that we need to do, you need to do it, I need to do it, and other people, we all need to do it. And that is, I mean, it's becoming more and more popular to say, but it is true, and that is self-care. I mean, we really do have to be willing to stop and recognize how we feel. I mean, that was a big hit. That was a big blow, right? Big, huge blow. And that was unexpected. And it came before we thought it was going to come. It's like, what? We already know this? What?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the thing that I do want to emphasize too is the importance of breathing, right? And taking care of ourselves. And if we need to not, to be honest, if we need to not talk to somebody, then we need to not talk to them, because if it's going to stress us out, then it's not going to be helpful for anybody, them or us. So
Yeah. I feel
self-care
that.
is important.
I
Yeah.
feel that. I think having the, again, awareness, the recognition of like, this raises my blood pressure and I
Right.
can't just live like this for every
Yeah.
day for the rest of my life. I can't just live like that. It's not sustainable. So
That's
you
exactly
know,
right.
yeah. But, talking to you does not raise my blood pressure. It's actually just, I appreciate you so much and thank you for sharing the space with me and for coming on the podcast and for really being very big and brave in this conversation. I think these are my favorite kinds of conversations to have where, you'll come on here and you'll meet me here. And especially as
That's
somebody that
good.
I just met.
I
I
know
mean,
you have a
man,
way of
that's
bringing it out, though. See, I think you have a way of bringing it out there,
thank
Sarah.
you so much for saying that. I really,
Yeah,
really
seriously.
appreciate hearing that. Thank you. I hear
Yeah,
you.
I
I
mean, I
respect
knew
that.
you, I knew you meant it. You know what I mean? So I felt like you cared, right? I felt
I
like
do.
you cared for yourself and for the people who are listening.
Yeah.
So thank you for making it a safe space.
No, no blue bracelets required. Look at us. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Exactly.
you for that. So, I always like to end these conversations with the same question. It can be work related, but it certainly does not have to be. And you've got another thing behind you on the video is the word joy. So, I like to ask,
Mhm.
and this is tough right now, and I feel that, but what is something that's bringing you joy right now?
Mm, that is tough. You're right, I do have that up there. Now I should look at that more often. What's bringing me joy right now? Well, we already know what's not bringing me joy. What brings me joy, I think, is a couple things. One is my family. I have two sons, they're adults, and a husband who I've had forever, 42 years. And so what brings me joy is that I have some really good sons and I'm really good husband and really good sons. So I think my family brings me joy. We can talk about things honestly. And I think the other thing that brings me joy right now is I did just recently start that Empower Her Collective group, and I'm feeling good about who's in it. Like I say, I have some white women in it. And so, I'm like, well, I like them. I think they like me, right? So that's what brings me joy is the honesty, the willingness that they are to share and to learn from me and to learn from each other. So that's bringing me joy.
What is the, can you kind of share a high level overview? What is the Empower Her Collective and, who is it for?
It is a community. So speaking of community, and it's going to have what it has is we're going to do a mastermind group once a month. So once a month we do a mastermind group. And I've led mastermind groups before. What I wanted was to make it more than a mastermind group. I wanted to be more collaborative. So the platform that I have it on is called Heartbeat. And the platform that I have it on is that I can put challenges in there. I can put message. People can celebrate what wins they have. Like somebody's having a presentation tomorrow, and I wanted to go in and put how that went and to put what challenges they have and support each other and collaborate and say, you know what, I'm stuck on this, and have somebody else say, okay, I had that happen before. Here's what I did. And have somebody say, oh, I'm so happy this came out like I wanted to. It was a great success. So that's a win. So it's really an ability for women to gather together and share what they want and who they are in a safe space. And then we have a mastermind, like I said, where we get together and we learn about something in particular. What we're talking about in December is shift. What do you need to shift? Because we're coming upon a new year. And so it's time to take a look at what needs to shift in the new year. So that's what we're talking about in December. So I'm started it just last month, and I'm expecting it to grow, and I'm excited about that. So that brings me joy.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Okay. What's bringing me joy? Yes, at the time we're recording into this, we are coming into the holiday season. I'm slowly starting my holiday shopping, putting out some holiday decorations. That is definitely a source of joy for me. And it
Mhm.
is really my favorite time of year. I think, number one, because of the emphasis on being in community with the people you love. I really, really love that. I also, from the time I was a child, my parents really emphasized making holidays feel like an experience. And even when they were in different positions of like filing bankruptcy or whatever, like, but always the holidays, this holiday season, it was about an experience for us as kids. And I've carried that into my own family. So I like to create that for my kids. And so starting to lean in on some of that. And that definitely is a big source of joy. Plus, being in Arizona, this has been a very long hot season.
Oh
And
yeah, you had a lot of heat.
we
Oh
did. We were still over 100 into
I
October.
know. Oh
So
my goodness.
and that
Oh my
just is
goodness.
really unacceptable, to be honest. So I am so relieved that it is actually cool enough outside to like have our AC off and to open our
Finally,
windows.
huh?
And yeah, that's a big one. So this season is my favorite for all of those reasons. So yeah.
That's a good reason to cools off a little bit, right? What does
Yeah.
the temperature get down to? Like, what does the temperature get down to for you?
At night, like right before dawn, it can get probably, I mean, it gets below freezing.
Yeah,
But what's wild is that at this time of year, you see a really huge difference between day and night. So it can be like 40 or 50 degrees warmer during the day than it is at night, which is so we see ourselves go from like, 25 degrees at night to like 75 degrees
that is
during
a
the day.
big variance. Oh my.
Yeah, so it is actually so strange and interesting, but yeah, I think generally speaking, our days are in like the 60s and 70s through the
That
winter.
that
So
right there
yeah,
is good. 60s and
yeah,
70s.
yeah, it's
So
wonderful. This is
that's a
like
good
the
time. That's a
time
good
of
time to be in Arizona.
yes, this is the time of year where like this is why we live here, right? But
Now
yeah,
you remember.
the last two summers have been really rough. Last summer we
All
had like an exceptionally hot summer temperature wise. This summer it's just that the heat extended for so long. So we
over
didn't have
100
as
days.
many hot days, but it just wouldn't go away.
Right.
So yeah, anyways. So I'm happy for that. That definitely, you know what, that is extremely joyful. Thank
That's
you.
good. Yeah, there you go. There you
Yeah.
go. You answered one.
So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. I'm definitely going to read your book. And I'm not just saying that like people say that they're going to read. I'm
Right.
definitely going to.
Right.
I love reading and read a lot.
I believe you.
And
Thank
it's on
you.
my list. And I will definitely follow up with you when I do to
Okay.
chat
Okay.
about it. And
Okay.
honestly, I'm sure it will trigger more ideas for conversation. So hopefully you'll come back again.
Oh, thank you.
And I
Love to.
just appreciate you so much and the work
Love
that
you
you
so
do.
much.
And it was great to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I know that you have a long waiting list, so I really, I'm not kidding. I was really happy when you said, "Okay, let's pick a date." I was really happy about that because this,
I read your information and I thought no brainer. Yes, we need to have this conversation. We need to have it sooner rather than later. And I didn't even know
I know.
how much we were going to need to have it this week. So, but I actually,
It was
and
meant to
I
be.
thought about reaching out and asking, do you want to reschedule? Do you have the capacity for this? And I'm just so glad that we did do it though.
Me too.
So,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. I appreciate you
Thank
and
you.
we'll have you back soon.
Thank you so much, Sarah.